And we are back with another outstanding episode of Square Table Degenerates. Today we welcome to the show Mr. Travis Orndorff, son of WWE Hall of Famer wrestler, Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. How are you today, my friend?
Man, I'm wonderful. I'm wonderful. The problem with that word is it does, read it so often, through all these different, pages and times, on social media that it just kind of naturally comes out. And then, of course you get the smirks and the pun into, oh, that was a pun. And I'm like, look, it's just a word. But it's crazy how my father redefined it, not just for me, but for millions of his fans.
100%. Yeah, I always use the word outstanding because in the service, whenever somebody would, and I look at life as like a performance appraisal, right? You always got your outstanding is your highest, then your excellent, then your average, then your meet standards maybe and below average. So outstanding for me is always the highest because you always get the how is everybody today? Outstanding, sir. Just yelling at it. It makes me laugh. All right, so I normally start off by asking like how it was growing up, but we kind of know a lot of your youth, I would imagine, because like in the early days, like wherever you kind of like me back in we're about the same age, give or take a year or two. Back in the day, like wherever your dad moved to or work, that's where you kind of moved. So like for my dad, he was a boiler inspector. So like we were in Cleveland when he was little, then he moved to Toledo for a little bit, and then he had a job, then went to Chicago for a while, and then moved back to Cleveland. So like. And you just roll with it. You just be wherever your work was, Toledo, Cleveland, Chicago, etc. Now, did you seem to be more down south? And to start out with, when you was little, what was your earliest memories of like just where you guys lived and all that?
Well, so I have an older brother who's he's just under 10 years older than me, and so I was born in '78. Dad had already kind of established himself as a top performer in a territory, and so when I was born down in Tampa. And if I recall correctly, and I always get it wrong because it's like I should write this stuff down eventually because my memory is going. But we moved to, I had asked my mom at one point, but we moved to like Pensacola, so we were on the, on the west part of Florida, up near the Panhandle. And then I think we lived in Oklahoma. I know we lived in Louisiana. I think we went through Tennessee, North Carolina, and then by the time I really started to have my first memories, which would have been, 4 or 5 years old, we were living in Georgia. So I don't recall. I might have one memory of Baton Rouge that's very vague. Sometimes I think I see pictures and then somebody tells me the story and then that image is there. And all these years later, it feels like a memory. So I'm not like, I'm always like, look, I'm giving you everything I know that I can give you. We lived in Riverdale. I do remember those years, which is just south of the airport. And then we eventually settled in Fayetteville at the time I was like 5. So, truthfully, I lived in a lot of places that I don't have any, I wasn't going to school. I wasn't, they carry no memory I carry no memory of them. So the reality is I lived and grew up in Georgia. And the only time I really saw the rest of the world, if you will, I did grow up on the road with them because I got to travel with them. So I spent a lot of time, out on the road up in, the tri-state area, through the south east up, North Carolina, South Carolina, into Virginia. And then, we were in Boston. We, kind of did that, spent some time in LA, a little bit in Texas. Like I made my rounds around the country, but it was after we had already settled in. And, so I was very fortunate. But the thing is like, people talk about traveling on the road and it's a joke, but it's true. It's like, man, I saw the Holiday Inn and then the Omni or Stadium and then whatever local gym was there. Dad wasn't taking me to see, the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia. Now, a lot of times when I did travel, there would be somebody that he trusted. And, so I did get to go to some of those places, but it wasn't with my dad. He would go work, that afternoon. I would go with somebody that was connected to WWF then. And then, I get to see a site and then I would come back and hang out with him, through the evening as they were performing.
Well, have you since seen the Liberty Bell?
I saw it. No, I did. I saw it then. Like, but I didn't see it with my dad. Like somebody,
okay, I got you.
Somebody that worked with the WWF. I couldn't recall. And that was the thing. Like, when I was 13, I traveled with my dad for 21 days in Australia, and my dad worked the entire time. So there was some people, liaisons that we were comfortable with. There was a young lady named Deborah, probably my first crush, if I recall. And
this is great.
I was like, I just want to see what she looks like now. But I was 13, and so I went and I got to see Australia, but it wasn't with him. He was. I think we went to see Bloodsport while we were there. Like, that was the amount of time he would have, is a few hours to go see a movie.
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah. Checker Champ, this is Paul's son. That is correct. Now, let me ask you, you said you had an older brother. Is it just you two? How many siblings are there?
So I have an older brother. His name is Paul Orndorff. Dad's actually junior. And my brother's Paul Orndorff III. And then there's me. So just the two of us. My brother had some children, several actually. And so 3 girls. He had children at a very young age, and so my parents raised these 3 girls. And the oldest in particular, she's my niece, but she's my sister.
Okay. So you're just like me, man. That's wild. I mean, you got several life parallels. Both Gen Xers there. Both we're both. There's not much. Growing up there. I don't want to say the words out loud because some people might not like that, but. And we both got a brother too. I'm the older one though, and you're the younger one. That's wild. And our dad both passed away within a year of each other too. That's crazy.
I'll tell you something. Growing up, my dad loved my hair, and there's like videos of it. I'm like, man, that is some. I had a great head of hair. He would not let me get it cut, and so I always felt like it was huge. Like I had this helmet of hair. The Dutch boy. The paint. Like that's what I looked like. That. Dad's hair was always perfect, and so he wouldn't let me cut my hair. And I found it so ironic that, I would end up losing it. But so this goes back, what would have been about 15 years ago. Dad was diagnosed with stage 4 throat cancer. And of course, they're like, we don't know if he'll survive. By the grace of God, he had enough muscle mass that when he went through the chemo and the radiation, while it did have devastating effects on his brain, and ultimately his function and his body, but he was able to survive through because the cancer had something to eat, right? That's what the doctor had told us. But anyway, I go down. I was living in Indiana at the time, and so I get the call, and I'm working, and I can't leave to go visit him. I'm devastated, like I'm scared to death, right? So I finally, about a week and a half later, I got off of work. It was right after Christmas. I flew home. And I went upstairs, we had a big embrace, and he kind of acted like nothing was going on because, until I sat down and kind of poked, he wasn't going to share. He always did share with me, but it took him a minute. So anyway, I looked at him, tears in my eyes, and I'm like, Dad, are you scared? And he's like, he kind of shrugged. And I said, are you scared of anything? And he goes, yes. I don't want to lose my hair. And I'm like, what? Like, death is fine, but you don't want to lose your hair. That's the only. I'm standing right here. Like, it's not that bad. And he goes, well, it's not a big deal to you. It's a big deal to me. Like, but yeah, it was funny because life has these funny ways, and I love being bald. Like I like shaving. It wasn't something I struggled. By the time I was 22, it was pretty much receding, and I just shaved it. It's been that I've been bald longer than I had hair at this point.
I mean, me and you are exactly the same way. It was about 23 for me, and I was in denial for a while. I mean, I would go to my buddy, and he would cut it, and the line just kept going higher and higher. And I'd say it was right around. I was out of the service by the time I started shaving. It was probably 17, 18, 19, somewhere in there. I just said screw it and went all the way down. And it is a lot easier. Well, as a guy too, it's great because dude, I could shave my head once every month and a half, once every 2 months, even shave like that. It's whatever. I don't have to worry about it.
I've got a whole routine. I use the like the old school, like military style razors, the actual razor blades. And so I've got some of the Gillettes from the 60s that I had restored, and I use those. So it's like a little routine, something that I enjoy doing. But what happened to me was I was working at the time I was working at a retail company, and we were setting up the cameras, and I zoomed in, and I'm like, that guy doesn't know he's bald, and it was me. And I did not know I had this spot, and my best friend, I was like, Mike, why didn't you say anything? He said, I thought you knew. And I'm like, I'm not up there. So as soon as I saw that, again, I was 22. I might have been 23 at that point, but as soon as I saw it, like 2 weeks later, I shaved it and never looked back.
Oh, that makes me laugh because I used to be a security guard, and I remember when they'd have to press a button to get into the door, and where the camera was pointing, just like you said, it was like right here. The camera would be like right here in your widow's peaks. Like if you had any kind of loss, you could see it right there in the camera. It makes me laugh because there was one of the receptionists there. She's a woman, she's an older lady. She's probably dead by now, but Kathy something Hammond maybe. But she had the biggest right here. You couldn't see it like when you're just looking at it, but on camera, my goodness, just right here was a giant spot, man. That makes me laugh. Now, when did you first realize your dad had a different kind of job, or was that just a job? Like, what was there any kind of starstruckness when you was a kid?
I'm sorry, repeat that. Like, was I starstruck by anybody?
Yeah, was your like finding out? I mean, at some point, you become cognizant of what your father does for a living. Is this, is this like, okay, I'm comparing this to the other kids. My dad's got a cooler job. This is awesome. Or are you just completely ambivalent to it? He's just your dad. You didn't care. What's the vibe there?
So a couple thoughts. Number one is like, and I use this simply because I have friends that a lot of my friends are wrestlers' kids, right?
Right.
And so I've listened to their experiences, and we all kind of, we went through a lot of the same questions because you walk into a room and you do feel, when people know who he is, you feel very isolated. You can't relate or understand to when people are asking you questions you don't have the answer to at a very young age. And for me, I use Georgia, who's just done an amazing job with her dad's legacy with the British Bulldog. Like, her last name's Smith. She could disappear, and now she couldn't disappear when she was with him because obviously, he would be recognized. But for me, Orndorff, like, there was no other Orndorff on the planet that anybody could, compare it to. So like, if they knew, and back then it was very quick. Like, we would go somewhere and they would go Orndorff, and you learn the look. And it's the look of, is your dad like, you're as soon as it happens, like, to the point that I'm like, yes, I wouldn't even wait for them to ask. I'm like, yes, it's my dad, and I just walk off. But here's what I would say. I can't tell you what the experience was like for different wrestlers' kids or anybody in entertainment. We lived in a small town. We eventually my dad opened a business there. We went to church. I never cared I'm a nerd. Like, deep down, I'm just a nerd. Like, I was, I would have much rather be watching a documentary than wrestling. Like, that's, and especially when you grow up around it and your version of it is distorted. So, to me, like, him being famous was more of a burden than it was. I've jokingly said this later in life, but I do think I did say it one time. I'm like, listen, my daddy can beat up your daddy and the rest of your family. Like, I think I said that like one time, because you become and have these defensive mechanisms to navigate through, the world you live in. But honestly, like, I just wanted to be accepted. I just wanted to be Travis. That was very much my desire. I didn't want to constantly be reminded of who he was because, at a young age, especially when I didn't have those physical gifts, I didn't have that drive and desire. Like, I would have much rather been in a book and or a video game. And so my brother, though, I think he took it a lot harder, especially because his fame. So I would have been like, 5 years old when 5 or 6 years old when WrestleMania happened, right? My brother was 15, 16. So he's dealing with a totally different, like, I went to a Montessori school. Like nobody cared about wrestling. None of those people watched wrestling, and they didn't let their kids watch wrestling, right? So I was very much in this bubble in the South that the only time I experienced any type of like friction, it would be like during my baseball games. And, you know, let's say dad was there, I would look up. And of course, for me, I just want my dad to be present and see me at bat. And, you know, there'd be a line of people waiting for an autograph. And I'm like, I'm competing with people for my dad's attention, not because he doesn't want to watch, but because, you know, of the name recognition when the times he was there. My dad was really good at being my dad. Like he wasn't, and I joke about it because there's so many things that I've come to understand about identity and character and values, integrity, and, you know, how the old school kayfabe worked and how it definitely impacted me, having to live a lie, and having to hide the truth. And because, you know, like you're constantly going from people who know you to people who don't know you. And if you have Orndorff on the back of your jersey, you know, people start to say things like, you know, even at 6 years old, they're like, well, you're not a specimen like your father. I'm like, I'm 6. Like, you don't have traps yet, right? Like, face. And then people, you know, that were healed, you know, to heal, they would say your dad's a piece of this. And like at a young age, you're trying to figure this out because you're like, my dad's a sweetheart. Like when my dad comes into town, he comes, gets me out of the bed, you know, and I'm cuddling with him. And so, I remember my mom one time, we were driving and she was speeding. She got pulled over. The guy came up, and she's told me this story many times, and I actually do remember it. But the police officer came up and he asked for a driver's license, and he walks back and he comes back. He goes, Mrs. Wonderful. And she's like, yes, you know, and he's like, you know, I know you're your husband, and so I'm going to let you off with a warning. I started crying. And so we're driving down the road. Mom's like, why are you crying? I'm like, I just want us to be treated like normal people. Like I don't want that attention. I don't want to have to compete with that. You end up buying into it. So the only way to survive it that I thought I could do was to play into it. So instead of being Travis, I became Mr. Wonderful Son. And being Mr. Wonderful Son is pretty easy. And so I have a pretty sharp tongue. And so, like, if, you know, people would say things about wrestling, like I had a comeback, and you better be careful because I've heard the promos. I can come at you really hard, and you, like, it's going to hurt you forever. Like I said some really mean things in my lifetime when I was in that position. But what I want you to know about wrestling, like as a child, like from the day I was ever remember a memory, like I knew who he was, what he did, and then, like, you know, the kayfabe. I grew up in it. My dad would speak Carney in the car to my mother. Like, you know, by the time I was 7, I could do it. Like it was just part of what he did. But he had a way of turning off the gimmick. And what I've seen in wrestlers' kids and a lot of wrestlers, like they lose themselves in that character. And when they come home, they can't turn it off. And they, with their whatever that is, the hype or whatever, they lose themselves, and then so does everybody else. But I will say this: I grew up in a dressing room. JYD babysat me, like when my dad went to the ring, and you know, like we traveled on the road, seeing those men naked and sweaty, a lot different than them walking up to the ring in robes and tights and wrestling. Like I didn't see the wrestling part. I saw the gross part. Like, and in comparison, my dad was a physical specimen. So me liking them wasn't really relevant because I thought my dad had a better body and was more athletic. And by the way, he was my daddy. So I didn't care that he was Mr. Wonderful. He was my dad. And that was his job.
100%, 100%. All right, we got some questions come in for you. Question for Travis. One was Dave asks this of every guest. He's fascinated with Hooters for some reason. Let me ask you this: have you ever been to Hooters? If so, when was the last time you went to Hooters, and what did you have to eat, if you remember?
When's the last time I went to Hooters? Oh God, 26 years ago. You know, during that time, I'm sober now, but I don't partake in alcohol or anything mind altering. But I don't think I ate much, but I'm pretty sure I drank a lot. And in fact, that might because I lived in this small town called Fayetteville, and you couldn't drink on the weekends, like Sundays and stuff. We called it Sunday beer because you had to buy it on Saturday. And so on the weekends we would, or Sundays in particular, we would have to leave our hometown to go drink somewhere. And there was a Hooters that we went to on a Sunday night. I actually think they were playing the pay-per-view of somebody that was wrestling back then. I couldn't tell you because I really never watched. But yeah, it was a long time ago, and I'm sure I ate something, but it was a side or an appetizer to the Bud Light.
That's so funny, man. When I was in Baltimore for work. Well, I shouldn't say for work, but whatever, I guess. But this is back in 2014. It was a Sunday. Exact same thing. I was there because, like, in Maryland, you can't buy booze from the store on Sunday. You got to go to a distributor or like a restaurant. You can't like just get regular places. For some reason, the whole thing is closed on Sundays. So the only place you can buy beer, and I was dying for some beers. I didn't have to do anything. It was Hooters. So we went to Hooters, me and my buddy Bill, and they kicked me out. They said I had to leave because I didn't get anything to eat. I had like 4 pitchers. Like, you got to get some food or, you got to leave. And I didn't really have any more money for food. So I was like, all right. And I left. It was great. All right. Man, Dave's got some hot questions coming in, brother. This is going to get crazy. Question for Trav. Can you have a pro wrestling match? Hey, listen, Dave, Travis wasn't the wrestler. His dad was a wrestler. So he's not.
I'm just a pretty face. I'm just too pretty for prison. So. But I will tell you, Devon, didn't he wrestle in with glasses on? That answers your question.
Yeah, it was glasses or goggles. Yeah. No, did your dad being a wrestler and all that kind of stuff when you was younger? I don't want to say ruin it, but if say my dad was a mall Santa Claus and I knew that was going on there, did that kind of stuff that really because when you said you had a different perspective of it, and I never really thought about it like that. It's like from those of us on the outside, we're watching WrestleMania 1, WrestleMania 2, whatever. It's magical, it's like when you're there, like you said, you see these guys getting ready and they're all sweaty and shit. It's kind of like, okay, this is whatever. But did your dad being so into the business and being so good, did that I hate to use the word ruin, but did that just kind of distort and just make it like, I don't really care about this for you?
Here's what I would say. Anything that you're exposed to at that level is going to desensitize you. And so if you grew up and you knew how to do a magic trick, and your dad's a magician, but you know how to do the trick yourself. Like the joy is the reaction people have, not the trick itself, right? Like, so I enjoyed that people enjoyed him, right? But again, like I was learning French and I skipped 2nd and 3rd grade, and my dad did not want me to have anything to do with wrestling. So I was in private school. I didn't have that exposure, and I thought about this in the last 4 years. I made a lot of, bad decisions for a long time living under that, in that kayfabe world. I was dishonest. The thing about kayfabe is it teaches you to lie. And when you learn to lie that young, you lose sight of what is true, because wrestling in and of itself is somewhere in between, right? Like we used to joke, like people say wrestling's not real, but the paychecks are, right? Like so how fake is it if there's a paycheck coming in, right? Like, and some people will be like, oh, they've ruined it with this, they do the WWE Unreal and they're showing behind the scenes and it's ruined wrestling. I'm like, if anybody did what they did right now, that would be aggravated assault. There would be multiple felonies handed out. Like, if it ruined it because you knew about the backstage guy, like, why did you think it was real in the first place? That's a felony. And so for me, when you say did it ruin it, I think that's an answer that can't be, or a question that can't be answered. But I would tell you, I never was inclined. I'll say this should answer your question. I have watched one full match of my dad wrestle in my entire life. And it happened after Hogan died. And I watched the big event, and I watched online through my live stream, through Paul Orndorff Legacy page on Facebook. That's the first full match I've watched from beginning to end in my entire life. Now, I've seen every promo. We would be in the car and be hashing out promos on the way to certain events. And, probably the reason I've learned how to be so mean. But, my view of that world was always, it's a business, and there's volatility. There was, like, I experienced financial insecurity at an age when Dad left the WWF and the bowling center failed, and I had to change schools. So the magic you see, there's a reason there's Dark Side of the Ring, and they're going on season 7. And from my knowledge, from the conversations I have with my father, I could do 3 episodes on my life from the kind of the effects it had living in that world. Like, I used this example today. I was talking to somebody that's a preacher's kid, right? And she was telling me, like, about this really rebellious streak that she had. And she was like, I was laughing during church. I'm like, your rebellious streak and mine are not on the same planet. Like, I was able to go to strip clubs at 17, 18, 19. And so, and I'm not condoning that, but like, I tell stories and I look at people's faces and I'm thinking it's going to be funny. And you see their face, you're like, oh, this is traumatic. I am so sorry. Like, because it's just, you have this different perspective of the world. If you grew up poor, you can't understand, nor did it desensitize you. If you become rich, you don't even know what it looked like.
100%. What random? Let's get a couple more of these questions out the way. We had some good, fun ones coming in here. Question from Dave: have you ever been to the Empire State Building?
Absolutely not. I hate heights.
Really? Okay.
I'm not like, no, thank you. I like, even when I watch a movie and they're like my hands will sweat. It's probably the only time that I could twerk because my butt starts, like spasming because I'm scared. I'm not a big fan. Like, I don't know why anybody would jump out of a plane. The plane is perfect. It's got great exposure. I'm not big on the seat belts, but no, I have no desire to do anything that I can't do on a 6-foot ladder. You
remind me of because it makes me laugh, because back in 2021, me and my daughter Nikki went to New York City, Manhattan there, and I love secure heights. I'm not considered to say like I'm a parkour guy and I'm gonna hang off a tower with one thing. I'm not like that. But if it's
I felt sick just you saying that because I imagined it.
Because if I'm secure, it's whatever. And I love, and I've been up to the Empire State Building probably 3-4 times, I think, by now. And Nikki would not. She was like this, right in the wall. She was like, I was like, I wish you had told me this before I spent the $18 we can come up here.
I did go up the last thing I ever did that was along those lines is I went up to the Statue of Liberty. We went up the torch. And then we got to a point where there was no railings. It was just stairs. And I was like, nope. And I think I was probably 8 or 9 years old. And I turned around and went down. And I think that was probably like, we spent a lot of time without our shirts on as children, like, even though I didn't have my dad's muscles, Dad did not believe in shirts. And part of it was actually, he knew and understood, and science is how supporting it, like you get vitamin D. And so I've never really been sunburnt. We always were tan, nobody ever thought I was Caucasian when I was a kid. Like, very often they'd be like, even now, some people are like, are you Mexican? And I'm like, no, not at all. But I can get really dark, but like, we would lay out on a towel on top of the roof of our house. That's about as far as I could go. Top of the house, of the roof, second story. Yeah, I could do that. But outside of that, no, I have no desire to be anywhere. Like, God put me on the ground with 2 feet. He did not mean for there not to be anything underneath it.
See, I would love to skydive. However, I don't want to do like the training skydives because, dude, I'm not. I can't have some guy strapped to my ass and consider myself a man. I'm sorry, and I know there's like certifications involved with this bullshit, but like I see these pictures and these guys are like, well, I'll skydive, like this, and there's a guy right behind him going like this too. It's like that guy's right on, dick to ass action. And I know there's fabric in between. I know it's not technically gay, but like that's just not a manly picture to me. It's not. So will I end up skydiving? I don't know. It'll probably be one of those things I do when I'm 30, 60, let's go sky, whatever. But it's not on my list. And it's funny because I don't even want to talk about it anymore. Like the stuff I got on my list of things I want to potentially do, because it's like all stuff on heights. You'd probably be like, no, I don't want that. But
I can handle blood. I can handle needles. I'm fully covered. Not much bothers me. And nothing ever offends me. I've got very, very thick skin, right? You had to. I mean, I was very sensitive at one point, but I worked through that. But I'm not adventurous in that way. Like I watch ESPN while I'm reading. Like I'm more inclined to watch a debate or somebody speak. And then, I'll run down a rabbit hole, but yeah, so none of that's for me. I love to cook. Like that's, I can, whether it's a grill, I made my own cast iron skillet. I have my hobbies and things I enjoy doing, and it's usually with my brain and hands and or my mouth, one or the other. So one of those three, because I do write a lot now as I've gotten older and different perspectives. So yeah, all of that excitement and staying out, like I'm in bed by 10 p.m. I wear a ring so I can track my sleep. I'm a nerd, and I'm very comfortable being that way.
Well, that's a great segue to my next question. When you was younger, what random hobbies did you have that you were a kid that others may not have had for whatever reasons? Like, do you have any expensive hobbies or sports you played, or like what were your things when you was
Well, it's not. This is actually not sexy, but it's reality. So we owned a bowling center for a short period of time. So like I did have some athletic prowess at a young age, and I bowled, and I was a pretty good bowler. And then I got my black belt in karate when I was young. I was really good at math. Like I learned how to speak French. When I was young, I couldn't do it now, but I really was very much involved, and I did the rec leagues, but I certainly wasn't the athlete that my father was, and so trying to live up to that is impossible. So for me, I tried to avoid it, but what ended up happening is I was 9 years old, and I got severely sick, and it's now they referred to it. The name is complex regional pain syndrome. I saw a documentary about it recently, and but I lost the use of my hands and my feet, and so as Dad was leaving the WWF, I was in a hospital, and they didn't expect me to live. So there was a period of time where I went from like 83 pounds to 52 pounds. Dad would come in and sleep on a cot in my room. I was at Eggleston Children's Hospital, and they gave me every test under the sun, but I lost the use of my hands and feet, and I had neuropathy that just felt like I was on fire. And from there, that shaped my entire life. Like the rest of my life was built around trying to do things that I wanted to do, but also dealing with the physical pain and the trials and tribulations that come with that.
Okay. Now, bear with me on my camera here. My GoPro is kind of jumping around. I'm trying to get back to the camera with the thing here. Hopefully, you can still hear me. I think it should be up. All right, there we go. All right. You've stated many times you're not a wrestling fan, but you've gotten to know some of these guys, that your dad worked with over the years, some of their kids for sure. Did anyone that your dad have a friendship with that, sticks out in your head that maybe, we may not realize as, casual wrestling fans? Like, you did mention the Junkyard Dog. Was that one on me? Who is some other names you could tell?
So here's what I'll say about my dad. And I learned this from him, that just the level of loyalty and respect they had for each other. It is something that if you've been on a football team and you've been on a group, like a missionary group that goes and builds a house in another country, like there's these relationships you have in these intimate moments of experiencing life that are, they're invaluable and they stay with you. And so being around those guys at a young age, I didn't know it then, but they always showed my dad the most respect. From like, I actually don't like the term jobber or mark or ring rat. It kind of bothers me. Like, I know it shouldn't because it's not my words, but I'm like, I know those guys. Show some freaking respect. Like, those guys, they were on television at the WWF, and you're calling them a jobber? Like, what? Like, if you're on an NFL team and you're a backup, you're still an NFL player, right? And
right.
So, like, I knew everybody within that world, and my dad had the utmost respect for them. And I think my dad taught me that at a very early age. I remember in Florida, we would go to different parts of the state. Like, there's a strong Cuban district, And my dad took me there to this place that he used to have breakfast when he used to go to the University of Tampa. And the guy comes out and, he speaks English, but it's not great. And my dad's like, this is a wonderful man. He built this business. He loves his kids. So there was just like the way my dad introduced me to the world. It was always about respect, right? Doesn't mean he didn't have a temper and he did some rough things. But what I'd say is the examples that I would give are like, Brian Blair, for example. Dad and him were good friends. Brian was there the day I was born.
Oh wow!
And it tells the story about going up to the the room and asking if that was really me, because I had hair. I was like born I did my DNA test and I came out like 83% Italian. Because my brother got in a lot of trouble when I was a kid and dad was huge. I'm like, maybe I'm adopted. And ironically, they had this hospital. It was a movie in like the late 80s called Switch to Birth. And that was where I was born. And I'm like, Mom, are you sure? She gets so mad. So Brian Blair was there when I was born. And, Dad, he called Dad Oscar because Dad was always so grouchy, from Sesame Street, Oscar the Grouch. And he called him Cooper. And so I talked to him over my entire life, I did spend time on the road with different guys. I tell people Nick Patrick was the first person to, Jody. Oh my gosh, the brain just left me. But the Assassins, Jody Hamilton, Joe Hamilton Jr. So he put a guitar in my hand when I was 16. So I had these experiences. And I went and saw him recently. But as a kid, when Dad was at the power plant, running the power plant, Chuck Palumbo came over and was working on my dad's Land Cruiser. Sean O'Hare. You have these interactions where they have so much respect and honor for your dad that it's like you don't see them as wrestlers because you realize they're elevating my father. So why would I then elevate them? They're elevating my dad. I'm already in the right spot, right? I will tell you, Steve Austin. I learned how to drive a 3 on the tree at his house when he lived in Georgia, and Dad was looking at buying one of his older trucks. And so three of us were out in the field. And one time Steve came into town and the three of us were in my dad's truck. It was, one bed. And, I'm 16 years old. I'm sitting in the middle. So it's these two dudes are huge. So it's already really tight. And we pulled up to a red light, and these girls that I went to high school with, Steve leans down so it looks like me and Dad are just sitting really close together, and he rolls down the window and starts talking to him. I'm I was constantly ribbed. There was borderline child abuse. Let's just be honest. So I remember when I got my first vehicle, which was an old truck, and Steve Austin called and wanted to ask for my dad. He knew I got the truck, and he's making fun of it, calling it a toy truck, and he's going to put it in the back of his real truck. And so I would interact with them over the phone, or they, Rick Rude came over to the house and they went hunting. And here's what I would tell you. One, as a child, there's so much of a spotlight on you. I was constantly trying to please people, and I was constantly trying to live up to this thing that was Mr. Wonderful, and how people had elevated him and they were connected to his childhood memories. And so the truth is, almost every one of those guys, from Hulk Hogan, who I spent, multiple times, when I went into college, I went to go visit, and Hulk, Terry said, hey, bring Travis in here so I can see him. I hadn't seen him in, 15 years or 10 years or whatever it was. I think it was 10 years. And so I had these very human interactions. What I would tell you is they're not who you think they are. The guys that get lost in their gimmick and that's the only identity they have. And I'm going to use an example because I love this guy, Jake the Snake Roberts. That I asked Dad one time about what was it like, because I knew the events. I just said, what was it like to walk out to 70,000 people that hate your guts? Talking about the big event versus Hogan. And he said, son, there's no way to describe it. There's not a drug that can duplicate it. There's not an experience that you'll ever understand that will explain how good that felt. And, that's a drug that's why I think a lot of them becomes addicts. It's because they're constantly chasing that high And once you've experienced it, like, you're depressed because you can't replace that with something else. And I remember Dad, I was in the car and Steve put it in his phone. Dad looked at Steve and said, you know, there is life after wrestling. My dad loved hunting. My dad loved going to the gym. He didn't go to the gym to be a wrestler. He went to the gym because that was part of who he was. You know, my dad was going to Bible studies and stuff like that. So the thing about every one of those guys down the line, Jake struggled with that, I think. And then later in life, and honestly, you know, he was rebuilt, and Diamond Dallas Page is a part about that. You know, I'll tell you about her, or Diamond Dallas Page as well. Like, I saw those guys, and they're nothing like what you think. They have the same insecurities, the same egos. You know they can't live up to what you think they are. Most of them are pretty introverted. Rick Rude was so quiet. Like, and you know, I would see his promos. I'm like, that's not what he's like. You know, like that. My experiences with them, it was hard to even watch it because it was so contradictory to what I knew they were really like, right? But I will tell you, and Mark Miro, he reached out to me a couple of years ago, and we went to the same church, and I sat down with him and talked. And you know, I've gotten to talk to a lot of guys that my dad wrestled with. But I was at a show, independent show up in North Georgia, and I'm sitting there, and this is how surreal my life is. Diamond Dallas Page is there, and I'm sitting there talking to his wife Paige, and I because I'm just now learning what fans are like, because I hated fans growing up. Ruined my life is the way I thought of it. You know, you took away my dad, you know, and I didn't know I hated them, but you know, you get asked the same questions and you don't have the answers. They want sexy answers. And I'm like, man, this stuff is boring. Like, you know, you want drama. I can tell you about what I did in my 20s. That's way better than that stuff. You know, but I'm sitting there and I've seen this evolution happen where these guys, a lot of them came from a trailer park and went into wrestling. Like, it wasn't a sexy thing to do. It was, I'm an athlete. I'm either going to go dig a ditch or I'm going to wrestle. And that's kind of how Dad ended up doing it, because he was a freakish athlete. He hated being away from home, which is ironic because he went into this. But I'm standing there and I've seen this evolution of DDP from the time that I was a kid, not the wrestling side, but he's become this spiritual mentor to people. And let me just tell you, I'm standing there, I'm talking to Paige, and there's a line of people. I'm like, this dude hasn't wrestled in 20 years, and he's got a line almost out the door. And I didn't understand it. And I look at this woman, and she was on her way up. And I say this sincerely, because when Dad died was the only time I ever started to get online and interact with people, which has been the greatest thing ever, that I got to meet you guys. And I always wanted you to see my dad through my eyes, but I got to see my dad through yours. And I didn't expect that. It blew my mind. Every single time he was gone, he was making a memory with you that evolved and brought you joy. And I hear reminders of parents and dads and grandparents. And I'm reading these stories about how my dad impacted, and I am bawling because of how selfish I was. And right. All these times he was gone, they have purpose. Some of my closest friends are wrestling fans. And I by the grace of God, man, because that's not me, but I'm standing there, and this lady, I looked at Paige and I go, I've never been that happy about anything in my entire life. And I became envious. Now, here's the cool part. He stays there. He's talking to everybody. A guy comes up. He signs an autograph. He's overweight. And he's like wanting about DDP. Paige left me like that. She goes, I got to go. And she sat down and walked him through getting signed up, talking about and finding the eating plan. Like, they're genuinely good human beings. Mark Miro and the things he's done for high school kids, like, it will blow your mind. So the version of wrestling I had growing up and the identity that it has today with a lot of these men, with Lex Luger changing his entire persona and having gone through the addictions and the abuse and the steroids and everything that came with it, like, these guys have become amazing people that they touched you one way, but today they're inspiring you in a different way. And that's the perspective of it.
Oh, yeah. You touched on some names there, man. Yeah, Lex Luger, he was, I don't know if he's wheelchair bound or not, but I know he was. Not
anymore.
Oh, is he really? Oh, geez. Yeah,
he still struggles, but like, he's been doing the DDP yoga and has started to rebuild his strength. Like, listen, I'm just telling you, the guys I grew up with, and I mean this almost across the board that I recall,
right?
If they're still alive, most of them found God, that most of them became a born again Christian. And for whether you believe it or not, it's working for them. And I will tell you, I remember meeting those guys when I was younger, and I would, Dad would introduce me, and they would be like, "Hey," they were polite, they weren't rude or anything. But like after Dad died, I would walk up to some of them and I'd be like, "Hey, I'm Paul Orndorff's son." Remember, I went up to Arn Anderson, and they're kind of defensive because they're waiting for, what wrestling fans do. Some of them get really excited, and they got to be careful, right? And I said that, and Arn stopped and goes, "Your father gave me the best advice I've ever gotten. He was a really good man. I miss him." And that was meaningful to me. Like, that I found out more about. I found out more about his character. I knew it, and I saw it. I didn't know he was that good at it. I mean this sincerely. Like, he lived up to his name. He really was wonderful. Like, I'm not getting no pun, no crap, no BS. Like, man, like I could fill a book with stories of things. A fan reached out to me and sent me the story. He was 15, 16. He was living up in, the tri-state area. I think he was in New Jersey, and he waited all day, couldn't afford the ticket. My dad walked out with a towel on his head, and he went over and said, "Mr. Wonderful, can we get an autograph?" And my dad tells him no. And then he goes, "But I'll take you to eat." And he took him and his friend to a pizza shop, sat down, had dinner with them, put a workout plan together, told them to finish up and use their brain, get good grades, honor their mother and their father, and then signed anything they wanted.
That's where it's at. Well, I'm like that with, whenever I run into, I've talked to so many, people. I don't really get starstruck, but like if there's somebody who I like, oh yeah, it's like, why would I? What are you going to do with an autograph, really? Like, even saying, yes, sign my box of rolling papers there, Paul Orndorff's kid. Come on, Travis. Like, what am I going to do with that?
I have beautiful penmanship. That's the only thing you should know. Even though my right hand doesn't work, I have beautiful penmanship. I write like John Hancock. But I'll tell you, being starstruck is hard when your dad's your hero.
Right.
Like, how could anybody compete with that? Like, I'm not saying y'all should feel that way, but he unconditionally loved me. What do I need? I met Dennis Rodman, he's tall, right? I spent time and I had dinner with several wrestlers. I met some of the only person I think I would have been starstruck from would have been like Michael Jordan, right? Like, that would have been, but honestly, as a kid, when people if I had somebody I could go to dinner with, it would be this person. And I'm like, I want to meet Winston Churchill. That was kind of, again, I just saw the world through a different lens. But I'll tell you, my dad loved me so much. I didn't need anybody else. I didn't need anybody to be my hero, because I had somebody that I knew was going to walk the walk with me, arm in arm. And so I'm not taking that away from anybody, because when you grow up in it, you just don't care, because I know how these guys get dressed, eat, how they smell, what they do in the shower, their bad habits. So when you see that, then anybody else that's famous, you receive the same way. And I'll give you a small example. Is I recently did a post, because we have our social media pages, and it got 2 million views, right? And people start to celebrate it. And I'm like, I wrote that 15 minutes on a Saturday morning in meditation and prayer, put it on paper, fixed the grammar, took a photo of my dad and Hogan, cropped it. I'm like, and then I did my laundry and I made dinner, where people start to see the some things that you're supposed to be so excited about. You're like, man, I was just living my life. I'm glad you liked it. It was authentic. It came from my heart. It's something that God put on me. But at the end of the day, I took a shower. You know what I'm saying? So all the things that you see of being when I see somebody that's famous, my first thought is who are they really? Who are they when these people aren't around? Because that's the person I want to talk to. So when I would get around different people, even when I went to the Hall of Fame for the WWE, like when I got around some of these guys, like I'll tell you who my favorite person was, Bobby Heenan. We sat in the back and he told me story after story after story, and I just cried laughing. And he's one of the funniest, quickest men I've ever met. And that was more meaningful to me because it was real.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, you touched on too, just having a good dad in your life is just so joy, and because it's blessed. Because like, you know, for whatever reason, not every person can have a dad. If some people's dad maybe died more, whatever. Sometimes parents don't get along, they don't see their parent. You know, but motherhood is usually there. But man, to have a dad, just a dad, period, is a blessing. And having a good dad who's involved and who really wants their sons and their children to succeed is so amazing. I mean, I try to take lessons. I mean, was my dad perfect? No, he was probably a huge pervert in some people's eyes. But at the end of the day, man, he taught me well. I mean, he got 2 kids who both have houses and kids, and I always try to, you know, live up to what I think he would want me to be as a good father. And it seems to be you're the same way. I mean, just having a good dad, just that presence there of, son, I'm proud of you. And you can always hear that in the back of your head, even though they're gone, you know, hopefully looking down on us. But you can always hear that in your ear. You can hear their voice in your ear saying, "Good job." And because a mother, we gotta be real about women. Women, they kind of love everything. You know, I mean, they're gonna love.
From a nurturing standpoint, they are more important. But from a character and values standpoint, you know, like and security. What I would say is, you know, this is again, I always tell people like, look, I know what works for me. I'm not telling you how to live your life. I only know how I lived my life, and I know how I live today. So when people are like, "Man, you're so good at this," I'm like, "You don't know who I used to be. You don't know like all of the things that my sins and my faults and the horrible things I've done and the things that I regret. Like nobody knows it because I wasn't on camera. Everything wasn't dissected, you know, in front of the entire world as some of these wrestlers were. But when I was really young, because this is the one, like I used to joke, and it's true, but like we would be some places and Dad would kind of get a little huffy, and I'm like, yo, you ain't Mr. Wonderful right now, like, and he would laugh. I was always told I was allowed to talk to him in a way nobody else would. In fact, his nickname for me was Little Caesar because I told everybody what to do. But we you know, my dad when he left wrestling, which was right at the time I was sick. You know, your dad's laying in the room with you when you think you're going to die, right? Like he wasn't always there, but he was always present. And to your point, but I can't remember the ages, but he became a born again Christian when I was young. It was like 1985, 1986. In fact, the pastor that did Dad's funeral, which we have that video of his funeral on YouTube, tells the story of his conversion, right? Like this guy like walks up to my dad in the gym in this small town. It's like, I don't think the gym is big enough for the both of us. And my dad started laughing. And then he was the pastor of the local church. He said, I want to invite you to church. And he goes to church and like he's sitting in his seat. I was there with him. I actually remember this. He was sweating. And I've never seen my dad sweat like that. And then the next day he went in and said, what did you do to me? And then became a born again Christian. And did he fail and did he still sin? Absolutely. My dad said some things that I'll never condone, nor can I condone my own. But what I will tell you is I saw him, and I don't know that my brother experienced this. I wonder something. I don't know that my mom's relationship with my dad wasn't deteriorated, even though he did make this change. But my dad spoke and gave his testimony at our church, which was pretty big at the time. And I remember he pointed to heaven and he said, he's the real Mr. Wonderful. And there's a Bible verse in Isaiah about Jesus being the wonderful counselor, God being the wonderful counselor. And he referenced that. And so for me, I knew what my dad was trying to aspire to be. And for that, and I saw him be open and humble. And Dad would apologize if he lost his temper. I mean, he was never violent with me ever. We got in 2 arguments in our life over the phone, right? Ironically, over the phone. And I did answer the phone. That I actually wish I hadn't have. Hogan might have been right that time. But, you know, those times that I had with my father, like we went through life together and I knew he was trying to aspire to be better than himself. And I believe the reason he'd be proud of me today is not because I've achieved what he did or I've, done what I've done. He would be proud of me today because I became the man he wanted to be. I'm doing things he wanted me to be able to do, and he wanted to be able to do. And they're not sexy, and they're not gonna, they're not gonna sell out 70,000 people in an arena, but their character and their values and their integrity base, where I'm able to reach and help a lot of people, people struggling with mental health or substance abuse, people that are less fortunate. God has given me a platform through this to help a lot of people. And I think my dad would put more weight in that every day, all day, 7 days a week, than he even would that time he stood in front of 70,000 people hating him.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, you've talked many times. I've heard you in different interviews talk about like your dad not allowing certain foods, this and that, in the gym.
Oh,
and
God.
He's this crazy fitness buff now. Like, so when you was little, did your dad try to get you into the gym?
Oh, yeah.
And like, I hated the gym. It looks like you're pretty strict, you're decent shape yourself. Like, what is your fitness regimen? Did you have one then? Even now, like, how are you on fitness?
So I will tell you, I'm having a neurostimulator installed in my spine. I've had some very significant severe injuries, but growing up, like it's just easier to say it this way than to go down the list. But because I was like, well, that actually makes. He never said this. This is my line, but I'm like, if God made it, you could eat it. And his thing was it should be one ingredient. We didn't have a lot of salt. We didn't have a lot of nothing was seasoned, which is funny because the way I cook, like people are like, you know how to cook. And I'm like, yeah, because I hated food growing up and I didn't enjoy it. I never thought his motto was eat to live, not live to eat. And so like the only thing we would do is like every once in a while, if the hot donut sign was on, Krispy Kreme when we were leaving Hartsfield Airport, like we would stop there and Dad could crush a box, right? But that was so rare, right? But no, I did. I got real heavy into working out later in life. But when I worked out with my dad, I was talking to my niece Brandy the other day about this. Like it was always one more rep. And Dad, like I've learned this, and I tell people this all the time because it's true. It should be little pain, little gain. You don't do it that fast. And his idea was like, I mean, you'd be on the 12th rep, and your one more rep was 6 reps ago. And by the time you were done working out with him, like I remember like begging God to not go to the bathroom because it hurt to sit down. Like it was miserable because he didn't have that speed where you worked into it and worked up to it. So I didn't work out growing up. I really didn't. Again, I was really sick, so I had a lot of physical disadvantages that I didn't really understand till later on. But I actually have I had a bicep slap tear. Next day I was throwing a softball and my bicep came off, and the tricep twisted over the humerus bone, and the bone fragments went through up here, my radial nerve, and left my arm paralyzed. So they put in a plate, elbow to chest, and they put everything back together here. I had wrist drop, so they ended up cutting my tendons off, and they moved them over to my ulnar nerve. So my arm operates off my ulnar nerve. So my hand works halfway, but doesn't work up top. And then I've had 2 back surgeries, both of which failed. And so I'm having this. I won't take opiates. They overprescribed me, and it took me down a really dark path. I'm very hesitant with Western medicine, even though I'll do the research. And I just had a procedure for the trial, and they offered.
Can you expound on that 1 second? Keep talking for like 2 minutes because I got to go to the bathroom because I got this condition where I got to pee a lot. So talk for 2 minutes while I go to the bathroom.
Okay, so I'll finish up. I was on. They offered me fentanyl, and I declined it. I did the procedure without any medication, which they were like, "I can't believe you're doing this," and I'm like, "I don't want any of that stuff." But yeah, so 2 different procedures. I had the trial run for the neurostimulator, which actually allowed me to walk. I've got I have a walking cane. I call it Frederick after Freddie Blassie. Classy Freddie Blassie. Let's see, how much more time do I got to go? I don't know. It's bored. I'm gonna go to these comments. What are y'all talking about? It looks like y'all are talking to each other. Sorry to hear that, Angie. Hey, Angie. It's Angie and Dave. Okay. Queen is the answer though, over Beatles. I don't know if that matters. Are we live on YouTube? I'm gonna try to find this. You back?
All right, we're back. So sorry about that, my brother.
You good, man?
Perfect. Yeah, I just man, sometimes you just gotta. I don't know. It's the coffee. Coffee just goes right through me. That's what it is.
It's diarrhea. That's
All right,
actually, I'll tell you, I drank so much coffee for a period of time that I was dehydrated. I did my blood work because I don't eat anything processed. I don't. I'd say 90 to 95% of the time I don't eat anything that's processed. But my blood sugar got to where it was like a 5.8, and I'm like, I know every morsel of food that goes in my body. This doesn't make any sense. And finally went to a doctor. I was like, what are we talking about here? And he's like, I think you might just be dehydrated. And so I only drink 1 cup of coffee in the morning, and it's a 90-day window, but I did a 45-day window where I drank water and hydrated, and my blood sugar dropped from 5.8 to 5.3 just with water.
Yeah, I drink so much water. That's another reason too. I drink because I smoke a lot of weed too, so to get you wanting to drink water. But I drink like several of these.
That was my pain medication for so when I broke my arm, they put me on 12 Percocet and 1,250 milligram tramadol a day and about 9,000 milligrams of gabapentin. When I came off of it a year later, and I went from off and on, like I was addicted. I didn't know I was addicted because I didn't go get heroin, but I didn't sleep for days, and I had all the, and it felt like I was losing my mind. And so I was saying, like, the neurostimulator, what they do is they put these leads in your epidural in your back, they bury them, and they run the leads down to a battery. The battery goes under your skin on your butt. And then I, recharge it once a week. It sends like a stimulation, like a TENS unit through my spine from the waist down, and it takes away the pain. So, I did work out a lot. I even worked out after I broke my arm. In the last couple of years, I've been very limited because of the physical pain I endure. So that has, but what's crazy, because I eat right, I seem to have maintained my muscle mass and my figure. Like I still got a 6-pack, but it's, it's visible, but it's not what it once was a couple of years ago. Goes in. I talked to the doctor. I was like, "Yo, can I get back to it?" Because I was in the gym 6 days a week, probably from the age of in my mid 30s, right? And I remember, I got to a point where even with my broken arm, and I had a PRP injection, I was 6 reps, 95-pound dumbbells, even with a broken arm. If I had done it earlier in life, I wonder what my body would have done. But ultimately, I've always gone through periods of extreme physical pain that have limited me for sure.
I've never liked working out. I mean, that's like, I'm a bigger guy. I'm 6'3", probably 240, 235, something like that. And I just even back, I would play. I like playing football, but I hated practice. I really did. I never liked lifting weights. I never liked running into people.
Oh, I love the process. I love coming up with the process and following through. Like I'm the guy that goes for 2 hours. I take 3-minute breaks in between my sets, but I do heavy and 4 to 6 reps, and then I'll go in the sauna for 30, 45 minutes. And yeah, I don't talk to anybody. Like, it's funny because everybody thinks I'm an extrovert. I'm like, I'm actually really quiet a lot of the time, and I gear up for these moments, and then I'm back to being quiet. One person I'm ever talking to is my dog Eleanor, telling her to shut up.
I'm quite extroverted myself, even if I'm like sitting there in a group and nobody's talking, I'll say something after. I should time myself on the average time it takes me to say something when there's silence in a group or something. It's probably like
I do that too. I don't think, for me, I don't think it's the extrovertedness as much as it is the awkward silence. But and my girlfriend said this, I don't know, we were talking about something, and I was like, because I'll when people we were watching a movie and I could name every person, their background, all this information. She's like, why do you know that? And I'm like, I don't really know. But we were driving down the road, and she had gotten a Mr. Goodbar. I got her a couple of Mr. Goodbars for her flight. And I said, I went and picked her up, take her to the airport. I brought her a bottle of water and some chocolate and, you know, a little love note. And so like she texted me and said, you know, she needed to burn off the calories, and you can burn 6.4 calories for every 30 seconds you kiss. And so like I sent her the math. I was like, we need to kiss for 2 hours and 12 minutes to burn off those 2 Mr. Good bars. And like, I didn't think that was nerdy at the time. I thought it was sweet. And like, we were driving the way up, she goes, you are the only person I've ever met that during conversation just randomly brings up statistics you've read. And I'm like, because I'll go into the National Institute of Health and like read studies. Like I'm just like, I'm not saying I'm really smart. I'm just saying I'm a nerd. Like that, like numbers and those things and like putting it all together. Like that's when I get excited about the world is, you know, people start talking about something like, you know, and then they get really mad because it doesn't follow their belief system.
Well, that's the beauty of the internet there, Travis, is that like you can take somebody who's, you know, kind of smart and maybe knows some things, and, you know, with one little device, turn you into a super genius if you know the right websites to look at, not just Google. I mean, Google's a dead entity at this point. I mean, Google's the first page and a half are all sponsored links. You got to get to the real sites, but it can, it's beautiful. Beautiful.
So I used to do, when I was younger in my early 20s, a friend of mine went through the FBI interrogation school for work. And so he came back and taught us the material. And I've learned this over time. But not over time. I learned it and then I did it and I didn't realize other people didn't do it. Life is always about asking the right question. So if you ask Google the right question, you don't get the sponsors. You might get one, but the right question will get you back. Now, you can also edit it to remove things like Reddit, because I don't want another person's opinion. No offense.
Right.
But I'm the person that will go read a study. And I remember one recently about how diet soda is just as good for you as for hydration as water, right? And this lady who is obese is saying, I know y'all are going to get mad that I'm showing this study because I'm obese. I'm like, well, it does support what your agenda is. And by the way, this study was funded by Coca-Cola. And I pulled the other 6 studies. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's not that I'm being mean to that person. It's that my view is I need more information. Who funded it? Where did it come from? Why are we doing it? Where the, one of them is, oh gosh, what is it? There was like, you know, people talking about Diet Coke and aspartame being like cancerous and all these different things. And in actuality, if you look at the majority of studies, like 80% of the studies don't support that. 20% do, and that makes it to the airwaves. I often will see stuff, and people pick on Angel Reese all the time on the internet. Like that's all, but she like 95% of the stuff that they post, I'm like, she didn't say that. Like,
right. 100% people. That's so. And I don't know what the exact percentage is. But I'll give you a case study. I'll tell you what. Back in 2016, I remember the exact date. Miss Cleo died, right? Because I went back to a post from 2010, and I changed the wording of the post to saying, was just on the phone with Miss Cleo. She's predicted she'd die in 6 years from today. It's kind of wild, right? Some shit like that. And then I said, wow, look at this post from 6 years ago or whatever. And if you know anything about Facebook, you can just click the edits and see what it is. But there were, I would say 40% of people believe that post is real just because they didn't know how to click to see that post edit. So like people just do not, and it's scary. How many people just do not pay attention or read the source of the material or what it says. They're like, oh, that's good.
Now, so here's the reason why, and this is actually relates back to wrestling. I've never heard anybody say this, so I'm taking full credit for it. When we went to the WWE Hall of Fame, and you got to remember, like, I knew my dad as my dad, and I knew he did those things, but most of the interactions about his fame was in a small town. It wasn't on the bigger landscape like it was like at the Hall of Fame, right? So, you know, everybody talks about the promos back then, how they're scripted. I'm like, no, they weren't. Like, I was there. Like, when they were planning a match or even planning a promo, they would go over to the corner and talk for 5 minutes, come up, and it'd be like, boom, 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 we'll hit this angle, boom, 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 we hit this. Like, that's how they talk. Like, that's what it sounded like. And they might come up with a few things that they wanted to say, and they didn't practice it. So Dad is going up for his Hall of Fame speech, which, by the way, he nailed it, knocked it out of the park. I was with him the whole time. I'm the reason that I still have the WWE Hall of Fame plaque that he allegedly left behind. He did. I picked it up and put it in my bag. And but when we went up and I go, Dad, you haven't written anything for your speech. Do you want some notes or anything? He's like, no, I got it. And he did that off the top of his head. And the thing I've learned, and this is really just learned, and it's about myself, right? And the one that he said, he makes this comment in there, and he says, I played with your emotions. Anger is the easiest emotion because it requires nothing from you, but it gives you something in return. Cortisol, adrenaline. Anger is something that you can become addicted to. In fact, I work with people sometimes that are dealing with schizoaffective disorder, family members or bipolar. They hate the medications because they don't get to live in the chaos. And chaos feels good. Like, you know, and so it numbs them down. Ironically, like I have oversensory. So for years I drank. And this isn't true, but I was cutting a promo playing around. And I was like sitting with some friends. I'm like, I have to drink so I can dumb myself down enough so I can talk to you people, right? Like we all, you know, they knew like I was just playing around, but you know, like when it comes to this where we're at in society, impulse control is shot. It's just gone. And so people will scroll because they're getting dopamine and they're chasing that dopamine. And so when they find something they can argue about, it doesn't matter that the person you're talking to, you don't know. It doesn't matter that you're not going to change their mind. You are more worried about getting to say your point of view than listening to understand. So I read these things and go, that doesn't make any sense, right? And that's just how, but I had to train my brain to do that. And in fact, I wasn't on social media for a long time. And when I got on social media and I had to interact with people and some of them said some really nasty things about my dad that weren't true, like I had to learn to navigate that. I had to learn because it got to a point where I had planned on quitting in a year because I was like, I don't think I can handle all of this stuff, right? And then, you know, through work and prayer and meditation and having, you know, some men that really helped guide me and disciple me, like I started to learn that when I knew who I was, because when my dad died, so did Mr. Wonderful's son. When I saw my dad in the hospital, kayfabe was done. I was done. I was going to tell the truth, and it doesn't set you free at first. It does eventually, because now people can say things about me or my dad, and I know I'm authentic. I know my values, integrity, and character, and I can stand behind it and tell you I did that and be okay and regret it and not condone it, and also say, but I didn't do it now. Like, so if somebody recently had said I said something, and I go, no, I didn't. I don't use that word. And I was telling my son this story. I didn't bring up the person. He goes, I said, yeah, somebody said I said this. He goes, you wouldn't say that. That's not a word you use. And I'm like, I know. But like the fact that my son knows that I'm not like that, that's authentic and it's identity. But my dad understood as being a heel, he could get you angry faster and easier than he could make you happy. And he played with your emotions. He did back in the 80s what social media does to people today. Social media is a constant algorithm of a heel. And people get to react. Now, I'm the kind of person now on dad's sites, and you know, you say something drugs, racist, you attack somebody, you make claims. Like most of the time I'll delete it, but if it's bad enough, you get blocked. Like I'm not getting paid for you to be on this site. It's free. So I am the president. I am the chief. I'm the First Amendment. I decide what can be said or not said on these places, right? I monitor those sites and manage them. Now I respond, but I manage them to make sure that, because I can absorb the hate and delete it. But Joey, I don't want you to read that page and then associate it that way. So that stuff is gone. If there's any arguments, delete and block. You're like, I don't want your negativity, because if you do it here, you're going to keep doing it. And so we probably would have another 10,000 followers if I wasn't so concerned about what I want on our pages. I don't mind if you say something like, oh, I didn't like him. But if you start using profanity, peace out. Like, I don't want that energy. But anger requires no emotions at all. man, being at peace, you have to learn how to be at peace because you have to learn how to let things flow over you. It required me to do this. Something might hit me on a Friday. I would go to sleep, and the next morning I go, oh, I don't care about that anymore. When I learned that, it's kind of like when I started to fast, the greatest lesson I learned wasn't, anything more than I realized I knew how to say no to an urge. But I will tell you, I've come to this point with social media. What somebody posts on my site, that's a reflection of their character. How I respond is a measure of my character. And so I will course correct if it's appropriate, but more often than not, I just remove it from my life because I don't need it. I really think most people would benefit from just removing themselves from it because we see the world through a lens that everything is based on our opinion. Even when people post on my sites or these pages, it's all about what they did. And I'm like, that has nothing to do with this post whatsoever, but I don't care, right? Because it's not negative. But it's just the way the world works, man. We're easy to get angry. It's hard to learn to love somebody you don't agree with. And I can tell you, my kids do stuff in their life. I don't agree with them, but they know I love them unconditionally. They know
100%. 100%.
And that's
this is a great follow-up to this next question I got. Like, what is it about the guys that were bad guys when we were little, like Roddy Piper, Iron Sheik, your dad, et cetera? They almost turn into good guys that what universally adored when we're adults. And piggybacking on that, are there any latent life lessons we could learn from wrestling itself and how to handle anger at the appropriate times? You kind of touched on that a little bit right there. But what is it about the like the Iron Sheik was beloved now? I even got an Iron Sheik t-shirt I wear. Same with your dad and Roddy Piper, guys, the bad guys when we were little. I mean, is it just we just see the world different now? Or what's your take on that?
It's all perspective, right? And so I'll say it. I actually told this somebody earlier, and I say it I'll say prayer, but meditation is similar depending on what you meditate. I always say prayer never changes my circumstances, but it always changes my perspective. Right. And so when I don't get what I want and I realize I'm fine, like I start to change, maybe I didn't need that, even though I thought I needed it. When you learn to say no to something for a little bit and you live without it, you're like, oh, well, I now can't, I got to question when I want something because I may not really want it. Right. So with those guys, here's what it is. It's very simple. During your formative years, from the ages of 5 to say 15 years old, as your prefrontal cortex is growing, and even into your 25, those men, when you interacted with them, you forged a memory that has never left you. And when you remember that moment, it brings you to a place of joy and happiness when you knew who the good guy was and you knew who the bad guy was. And even though you're in your 40s or 50s, that memory and where it was placed in your formative years, it never changes. It doesn't matter that you're 50. It still brings the same oxytocin and dopamine. And it brings all the hormones and the things that your body naturally does. Because I have people that are like, man, I hated your dad. And now because I know I got the inside look, I appreciate him. It's because he evoked emotion at a period of time that you will never remember your high school, graduation. None of that stuff will ever be forged in your mind. But I'm telling you that people to this day, and I mean, it's a lot, go, man, when your dad turned on Hulk Hogan, it was shock, it was dismay. They are I mean, some of them are CEOs of $1 million. Some of them are spiritual or even, influencers with hundreds of millions of followers. And some of them are just a normal guy down the street. There's something about one seeing a real life superhero. They did all these physical attributes that, they look like a comic book, right? In fact, the guys on the comic books weren't as built as my dad. They are only as built as my dad since that. You took and made superheroes. And a lot of people were like, I remember this is a few years ago, somebody said, man, I loved your dad. He was so amazing. My grandmother took me to that match and she passed in this year. And I said, my dad's amazing, but it sounds like your grandmother's pretty amazing too. And he's like, you know what? You're right. And it's like there's these connections when you're that age and you feel safe and secure and you're seeing this play out. And then later on, you realize these guys, like how much energy and passion. And like, if you ever watch my dad's match with her, he was a babyface or heel. He had one speed and it was intense. Only in like the 90s of WCW, he started to play a little bit and do those goofy dances I never liked, with the elbow that everybody else likes. Like he evolved, but like dad was intense and I'm that way too. Like I always tell people, I didn't inherit his body. I didn't inherit his hair. I have black hair. I'm 83% Italian according to my DNA test. There's so many things I didn't get from my dad, but I got his heart, and I'll take that over anything every day. Because when I go into something in my life and I do things, and I volunteered for about a year doing this thing, and people just assumed that I was my job and I ran it, and I'm like, no, I do that as a volunteer. They're like, what? Because I only know one way to do it. You do it all the way, and you bring everything you got. And so you guys at this age, it's why I always, when people complain about wrestling today, I'm like, you're not 6 years old. It's not going to feel the same as it did to you. It's not horrible. It's different. It's not exactly what you grew up with. But you know what? Most TV shows get canceled after 10 years. Wrestling has been on TV for 50, 60 years, right? Like, quit complaining. It's just not your generation. I still think music in the 60s is better, overall. But, buddy, I love my 90s music. Like, one's not better than the other. It was how old I was when I experienced it and the first girl I kissed. And, these small events that were so meaningful. And then when you look at these guys, this is just my opinion, but dad had listen, he was a saint with me as a father. My brother did not get the same dad. My dad was 18 years old, or 18 or 19 years old when my brother was born. So he was immature. He was going to the bars and doing fights, and he didn't find his career till his mid-20s. I did something similar, and my child was born when I was 23, and my second was born when I was 25, and I struggled with alcohol. And when I say I struggled, that's probably the wrong way to say it. I was addicted to alcohol, and I didn't know how to manage my emotions. I had a lot of resentment and anger from the way I grew up and things that happened. My brother has been incarcerated most of my life, basically for the last 35 years. There's a lot of drama that, people don't know about in my life and things I had to overcome. And by no means am I complaining. It was just reality, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I wasn't given the tools and skill set to deal with all these physical injuries I have and then still be resilient. But I got my dad's heart, so I've learned to do it. That's why I was still benching what I was with a broken arm, because I got Mr. Wonderful's blood. What happens to those men is when you go out and you are hated, my dad being a heel allowed him to say things he would never say and do things he would never do. He got to exercise those demons. And this is just my opinion. When people meet me today, I always say, I'm like, listen, to this day, if I went around some people, they would say I'm a tornado. But people that have known me over the last few years that admire me, and I'm like, listen, I'm still a work in progress, but I am a man of character today. And I always point to Jesus, but I got to tell you, if you want to live the way I live, it's not a bad thing to admire. It's hard. I've got 3 men I talk to before I make major decisions because I don't always trust myself. And sometimes I'll talk to this one. He's like, is that who God would have you be? And I'm like, no, and I don't get to do it. Right. But I don't do it on my own. Right. What happened with those men is the excess drugs, alcohol, women. Right. And I can relate to those. Right. Once you've tried everything and you have access to everything, and none of it works, you have 2 choices. You do it till you die, or you find something that will fulfill you. And I will tell you, part of the reason my dad left wrestling was his injury. Part of it was the fact that they didn't know if I was going to live. A lot of it was because he became a born-again Christian. He couldn't keep living that way, and it's hard to stop when you're on the road. You change of environment will help you deal with some of those demons. Women, sex, drugs, all of it, right? So a lot of these guys, they went through that. And and they were hated. Well, when you hate yourself and everybody hates you too, because you're dealing with insecurity, like you have no choice if you live past the age of 50 that you're no longer in the spotlight. Nothing else is going to bring that fulfillment. But I do believe, by the grace of God, after the resurrection of Jesus Christ, that through, and it's like you can become a Christian and you still, like, that's the beginning. Like, let me just tell you, when I became a Christian, I was still crappy. I just started putting pieces together and lived one day at a time, just like they talk about in the book of Hebrews, or what they talk about in an AA meeting. It's one day at a time. And I started stringing together good things and started to recognize my bad things. I have apologized to people that I did nasty things to and talk to from when I was 15 years old, because I would run into him and it'd be on my heart. One of them was a guy, I sat down with him. I'm like, man, I'm sorry. Like, I was horrible. We are friends to this day. And I did that 20 years ago. So this journey I've been on is similar to theirs, even though it's different. But those men have everything you could imagine, and they didn't find fulfillment. And so at that point, after you've done it all, you're at rock bottom. The only thing I've ever seen work, and I'm not saying, this is what you got to do, but I tried it all. I've got, every time I get because I worked in finance, every time I got a promotion, executive vice president, blah, blah, like I would be ready for the next one because this didn't work. Well, at some point my body gave out and I couldn't chase any of it. I found God at the bottom. He happens to be at the top too, but is it with the bottom when nobody else was around, when there was no other achievement, when there was no more money, when you had nothing left inside of you and you hated every fiber of your being, and somebody says, we're going to rebuild. And then you find a couple of men that live in a way that you're like, man, I want what they got. And so you start listening to them. And then you start stringing these things together and you get sanctified. You get refined. These men found redemption because they did everything you could never imagine doing, and it didn't work. It didn't bring them peace. You can wrestle at WWF, WrestleMania 1, 10, 18. It doesn't work. That 70,000 fans, that was a moment in time. It wasn't the boring moments when you're out driving and like, stupid, but like I'll be out driving and somebody will like honk their horn at me and I don't react. My girlfriend's like, man, you were like the most calm driver. And I'm like, were they honking at me? Because I didn't do anything and that's their problem. And then I'm like, the Army did a study on driving 10 miles over the speed limit for 15 miles and you only save 37 seconds. She's like, of course you know this. But my point is like prayer changed my perspective and it changed theirs because they had everything you could imagine and they were miserable. Oh, and by the way, at one point in time, and this doesn't happen to all of them, my dad came home and he was no longer Mr. Wonderful. When he was, 2010, nobody recognized him. Like the social media stuff, we get about 15 million views a month on Facebook. I actually think people have seen more stuff from my dad in the last 4 years than they did back in the 80s and 90s because of social media, which is crazy because my promise on his deathbed was this was not going to be the end of his story. And then from scratch, with a broken, grieving, depressed, miserable human being, I said, okay, I'm going to be the man my dad wanted me to be. And then 4 years later, WWE 252K drops in November. TV show, toys, merchandise, all of which that, by the way, they don't make us any money. We do all this stuff for free. Some comes in, but it ends up breaking even. Trust me. This is a passion, and this is a love story of a father that was intense in love what he did, including his son, who loved him and wants to share a story about hope and redemption and grace and fulfillment. And that's what those guys found later in life. They found it in the real connections and relationships, not in the drugs, not in the fans. The fans helped them, though. I'll tell you right now, if not for Dad's fans and social media, I don't know that I'm here today because that grief was unbearable. Unbearable. I begged God, let me die. I don't want to live. And it was fans that started to tell me these stories that gave me hope.
So your dad's death really hit your heart then. Can I ask you, Travis, what was you talked about some of it, but like, where were you personally in your life prior to, from like, say 2013-ish to when he passed away? Like, what was your mindset and your vibe? Were you still, clearly not where you are today, but where were you were you trying to get the question I'm asking here? Like it seems like it really seemed like my dad had cancer, and then he was in the thing for a little bit with the tube, so it wasn't like it was immediate. And then when he passed, I kind of knew it was going to happen because they said, you could come say goodbye, and I did, took a picture, and told him that the world was a better place for him being here, that kind of stuff. And getting to say goodbye, man, it's amazing. It really it kind of inspired me since then. I'm not saying my life is perfect since then, but like, man, the moments of being able to be there with your father at the last moment, it's really, really, really inspiring, man. It at least inspired me. So maybe like, but
know what I had to do to make that happen. That's the reason.
Okay.
So, I thought about this because the one thing I don't want to do, I'm going to tell the truth because it's not going to help anybody if I lie. You may not know it, but you'll know it. Like people read inauthentic people. 2013 was when I hurt my arm. Okay. And so they had told me to take 2 years off of work. I was working at a finance company up in the banking industry up in Indiana. Within a few months after that, we moved back home. I went back to work too fast. I mean, like really, I didn't have a working arm and I was on tons of drugs. And then I weaned myself off and everybody's high-fiving me. And so I had multiple procedures from then on. But Dad and I were always very close. We talked on the phone all the time. But after the cancer, which would have been around 2011, excuse me, it got to be where he would call and we would have the same conversation. And then he would call 10 minutes later, right? And so in 2015, or end of 2014, 2015, life was pretty good. I'd go visit. Now, I had a very tumultuous relationship with my mother. And she struggled with opiates. She had some medical conditions and it got a hold of her. And so I'll be honest with you, I hated her. Like, I mean, I've called her every name under the sun. And I mean, hated. And there were things that happened where I went to go to a closing on my house and there was a bill in my name that I didn't know about. And just craziness, right? So my mom and my dad had a very, very volatile relationship because I think my mom was scarred from some of the things that happened, as any woman would be, right? We didn't talk about it, but we all knew, and, I mean, it is what it is. Let's not kid ourselves because that's not going to help anybody, right? So 2014, 15, I'm down in Hilton Head with South Carolina with my family. And I get a phone call that my brother had gone after my dad and had beat him up. And so I left South Carolina, went over to the friend's house that picked him up, and I brought him home. And I had known it was getting worse, but this was when I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know how bad it was. Like being with him for 2 weeks was a lot different than it was just being with him for 3 or 4 hours on a visit. He couldn't remember where the bathroom was. And he did something. My dad was always into hunting and guns and stuff. He was always safe. I've never seen him make a mistake when it came with any of that. That he was just so on point. And he was showing me and my son a pistol. He was showing him how to make sure that it didn't have a bullet in it. And he actually let a shot off. And it hit the slate floor and bounced up. And the bullet charged I went, no, like he's gone, right? And so he couldn't remember where the bathroom was 5 seconds after he left the bathroom. Like I had arrows that I put up, but he wouldn't stay. And I knew my mom was not taking care of him. I knew she was volatile and violent, verbally at least. And there had been, like, at that point I called, like, I didn't know how bad it was there, but like I called DFACS, with Department of Family and Children's Services, and filed elder abuse reports. That started in 2015 that I started calling. And, you don't really know how they play out if they don't give you much information. That was the beginning. I did that. I think I did it every year from 2015 on. But I called the fire department and they'll give you the 911 call records. And there was like over 100 times that 911 had been called out to the house. Allegedly, somebody had overdosed in the house. Another family member was addicted and was in and out of the house. They were stealing dad's memorabilia. I mean, it was just complete chaos. My dad didn't really know what was going on. My mom obviously had her own, demons. And so year after year, but it got to the point I didn't want to go over there because I would get physically ill, not because of seeing my dad, but being around my mother. I'm like, I hated that woman. I'm not right for it. I'm not proud of how I handled it. That's truly, I called her every word you can think of, right? 2018, because of my own demons, because I'm still lying in my own life, right? I have my own struggles with different, addictions. So there's no judgment. Like everything I got mad at my mom about, I pretty much did, right? It led to me hurting a woman that I loved very much for my entire life, and I destroyed our family, like bottom line. And there's pieces to it, but I own mine, and that's the only thing I can tell you is I believe had I been a different man, things would have looked different, and they might have looked completely different. But I'm not proud of who I was. It's not a good thing, and but I had moved out, going through the divorce, and I get the phone call that the house is going to get foreclosed in 2018. Of course, I just spent my last pennies on a divorce attorney, and I had to raise $10,000 and to save my dad's house from getting foreclosed on because of failure to pay property taxes. By the grace of God, fans stepped up and helped me, and we got it done in like 48 hours. There's some crazy stories that week where God showed up. I got pulled over by a policeman. Ironically, the same thing I got mad at my mom about younger. He's like, "Why are you speeding?" I was like, "Man, I don't even know where I'm at." And he's like, I told him I was going through divorce. That's why the names weren't right. He's like, "Are you Paul Orndorff?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "I don't really care about that, but I've been through divorce." And the police officer said, "I'm not going to give you a ticket, but can I pray with you?" And this dude hugged me through a window and prayed with me after. And I was going 15. I was like, "Dude, I did it. I don't even like whatever you say. I did it. I don't know. I am out of it." And I was like 15 miles over, right? So we saved the house. And the sad part is I find out later on that, dad was disabled. So all you had to do was file a homestead exemption and there would have been no property taxes. Well, I told my mom to do this. She said she did it, because working in banking, I knew, but I don't know what they do or don't do. But if somebody says you do something, you move on. Well, move forward, it gets COVID, right? COVID hits. And I would go over there at times. Dad would call me on the phone. On my 40th birthday, he had this gold necklace. And it had broken, and I fixed the cross and got him a new gold necklace because he would say, "I don't remember when I saw you." And I'm like, "Dad, touch the cross, because if you've seen it and you touch it, you'll remember the last time you saw me." And so I remember going over there later and going, "Dad, when was the last time we talked?" And he grabbed the cross. He goes, "It was yesterday." And I was like, "Whoa, that is crazy," right? So Dad was deteriorating. And he was still doing these conventions. And what I think happens is these guys that are old school. I saw an interview recently where it was Eric Bischoff going to visit Hulk Hogan. Hulk had obviously started to deteriorate. And Hogan said to Bischoff, he said, "I don't want you to see me like this." Right? And so I think there's that old school mentality, not just in wrestling, just men in general. Like they don't want to say they're in pain. They don't want you to see them deteriorating. My dad's brain started to go, and his friends, God bless them, were like, "No, he's doing well. He remembers this." And I'm like, no, like he can't remember where the bathroom is. So people want to believe the version that they want to remember. Right. Nobody wants to see anybody age. But every year, whether it's saving the house from foreclosure or fixing the air conditioner or all this chaos that continues to ensue at my house, and my dad's not like filing for a conservator. I needed somebody to say he was not in a good position, right? And I don't even know if they showed up, but I can tell you one of his friends actually called Department of Family and Children's Services as well. But move forward during COVID, I went and visited one time. I got it 3 times, like back to back to back. Well, I would try to find my dad. His memory was pretty much gone at that point. And my mom would always have a different story. And so I finally pressed her when they were easing up restrictions. And she said, "He's at Grady Memorial Hospital." And so I hadn't seen my dad in like 10 months at this point. And I walked into Grady Memorial Hospital and I walked in the room, and you saw what I saw. And I flipped. And when I tell you I flipped, like, I'm glad nobody filmed it. So I come out of that room hot, and I mean, like, because I didn't expect that at all. And he's just basically naked in a gown and beard. He's got skin in his hair. His hair's down. His nails are long. And I'm like, there's no way this happened overnight. And I come out. I'm like, I want him coming home with me now. And they're like, we can't help you. I'm like, excuse me? They were like, you're not on the list. I'm like, what list? And they're like, the next of kin. So my mom had put her name, and then two of my nieces. The two nieces at the time were incarcerated. So none of the family members that could have taken Dad would. But the nurse looked at me and she said, listen, we've been calling the police to go out to your mom's house to tell her he can come home. And she won't accept the calls. And so that was, go back and get the 911 calls again and find out all the, so my mom had abandoned him. Bottom line, right? Like she abandoned him there. And I lost it. Like I don't even remember any of it, but I looked at the lady and I said, I want a social worker and I need it immediately. And she goes, we can't help you at all. You're not on the list. COVID restrictions. I go, ma'am, I'm taking a video of this. My father was a professional wrestler and I know we're going to get some traction. And if I don't hear from a social worker in the next 24 hours, I'm posting it and I'm putting Grady Memorial Hospital on it. And I don't care if it's COVID. Somebody could have brushed it. Like, I mean, and luckily I had a person I was with at the time, my girlfriend was like keeping me from going, but I left and I was crying. And you blame yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, I didn't do enough. Calling DFCS, that wasn't enough. And then you're wondering, why didn't any other family member know? Like you just go through all of it and you're like, and then, God built me this way, but so did my dad. Take responsibility. And so I didn't hear from anybody. I posted the video and caught holy living hell. I mean, good thing I was raised by a heel because I got some heat. And when I say I got some heat, I remember getting a phone call from a professional wrestler, friend of Dad's. And he's like, take that down. And I go, listen, I'm done with y'all's kayfabe BS. I'm done with the games. I don't care about wrestling. My daddy's coming home. Have you seen what happens to these people during COVID that are dying without a family member there? I'm like, that's not happening. I don't care what y'all think. Until my dad is home in my bed, in my house, I am not taking that video down. And they were like, well, Dave Meltzer said this. I'm like, who's Dave Meltzer? Like, I don't know who that is. And then Hannibal's running a show. I'm like, who's Hannibal? Like, I had no, dude, I wasn't online. And I certainly didn't care what, and I said this and I regret, I was like, do you think that my dad would want me to have the moral aptitude of the people in professional wrestling? Like, are you seriously going to tell me that's who I need to make happy? And at this point, this is like 6 years of this. It's not like it happened yesterday. I have been fighting this fight, and you can't make somebody do something. And if they're going to relinquish you as a conservator, then they have to sign off, and then you get your sister, mom. So my mom had told one of the people, they were trying to get him to go somewhere. So I can't send him anywhere because I can't go without his check. And so like that video stayed up, and I remember Hannibal reached out to me, and I didn't know him, and he wanted to do an interview, and then he called me. Guys, I can't. Everybody's so mad about the video that I can't talk to you. And I was like, okay, like, I don't know who any of these people are. Like, my world was so small, right? Like, and I'll be honest with you, like, I had done interviews with Hannibal. Like, I've read Dave Meltzer and watched some of his videos. Like, no offense to them, that world that they've created, like, I don't care about it. I don't care what other wrestlers think. And at that moment, that was my daddy.
Right.
That wasn't Mr. Wonderful. Nobody cares. So, and the truth is, if I look back, I didn't have anything else in me to do. I didn't know how to fix this. I was figuring it out, right? So is there thoughts that have gone through my mind? Well, I could have done this a different way to get him home. Very possibly, but I didn't know those then. All I knew is we were in COVID. They said you can't have them, and I remembered that I've been trying to do this for 6 years, and I was no longer going to play fair. needless to say, about 2 days later, I got a phone call from a social worker, and a woman who happened to be a wrestling fan said, I'll take him. And so my mom agreed to it, and she promised she was going to pay the woman this money. And I won't mention the name or the place, but when I talked to the lady, she's like, listen, I don't remember the social worker's name from the hospital. She's like, I know what's going on. We just need to get him here. He needs to be here for 72 hours. And then what we'll do is we'll have you take him back to a hospital, and then they'll release him to you. I said, okay. So we make all the arrangements, which took a couple weeks, right? She needed a bed space. So then, when he got there, I went up. I even let my mom come with me. Of course, she was buying clothes and stuff, and took some family. And anyway, went up. The first thing I did was took him to a barber, got him a haircut, got his face clean, got his nails, and just groomed him, right? And so I made a deal with my mom. I'm like, look, I'll help, but I want to be the first person on that list that they'll call if there's any issues. She said, yeah, of course. So the lady that ran it, she goes, hey, Travis, come here. And I said, what? And she goes, she didn't put your name on the list. And I was like, okay. So a few days passed, and they ended up taking him to the hospital. The hospital said, no, we got to do this different. That was on a Sunday. So then on Monday, I drove up, picked him up from that place, took him to the hospital. The doctor came in and said, your dad's dying. I don't know how long he has, but it's not long. So the best thing to do is get him as comfortable as possible. His brain is no longer telling his throat to open. So every time he eats or drinks, it got the potential to go into his lungs. He's going to choke to death, and it's going to be really excruciating. Because I had told him, I was like, listen, dude, don't tell me how good things are. I'm like, I don't need hope. I need reality. So I did take the video down at that point. Of course, it had already made its rounds. Me being completely unaware of that I didn't care. I didn't care at all. And so I brought him home, Joey, the funny thing is you don't know what you got in you until that moment happens.
Right.
You don't know what you got. You can tell yourself you got it, but then it happens and there's that little teeter-totter, and who you are comes through. Because I was done with kayfabe. I wasn't lying about my dad, and I wasn't lying about me anymore. So brought him home. The hospice team said, look, we need to start giving him medicine, and they said, we'll take him to our hospice place. And I said, absolutely not. He's not leaving my side. They're like, well, you have to clean him and you got to give him the morphine. And I go, okay, if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be me. And then the lady, they said, well, we'll come in, they'll check and everything. So, within 15 minutes, he had an accident. And everybody runs out of the room, and I'm putting gloves on, baby. I'm like, let's get this done, And so I stayed by his side every day. I think I slept in the bed one afternoon for 4 hours over about a 2.5, 3 week span. And I would allow my mom to come over, but I would schedule Uber to pick her up and her leave. And while she was there, I would leave. I was so angry. And I had screamed at her. I remember I went to the shower and I was just screaming at the top of my lungs. It was unbearable. I didn't speak to her during the funeral. But during that period, my nephews, my nieces, his brother, sister, and his nephew, friends, all of those people got to come say goodbye. And myself, Brandy, who I refer to as my sister, and my nephew, we all were there holding his hand as he passed away. And so, at that point, I made arrangements for the funeral. By the grace of God, fans stepped up. I was still recovering from my own injuries as well as again, you don't talk about all the stuff you're going through when somebody else is going through it. But I'm physically so impaired that I'm man, I don't even know how, I really don't know how I made it. I don't I've learned how to walk really in a different way 3 times in my life. And one of those was during that period, and then through that next year, or 2 years. But so he passed, and he passed with, there's videos because they had cameras set up I didn't even know about. That there's just videos of me just sitting there praying with him, and I was so angry, and it was in conflict with how much I loved him. And what I've learned is grief is not the absence of love. It's proof of the depth into which it exists, because it just fills you. And then you realize how much love you're capable of too, right? All the other stuff in the world just goes away. And I had a lot of time sitting there with him. You know, they said that he would pass in like 3 days, and she said it in front of him. I'm like, you don't know my father. He's going to last 2 weeks, and he lasted 2 weeks. And you know, I gave him every dose of medicine, maybe minus one time. And you know, at one point in time, we took him into the shower, and he didn't want to take a shower. And I was like, come on in. And like, I'm in the shower with him, and he's like, no. And he went and laid down, and that was kind of it. He laid down from then on. We had the funeral, you know, after that, I was blessed to have somebody in my life, Hugh Kirby, who had me go to this class on forgiveness, and I made amends with my mom for the way I acted. I didn't absolve her of what she did, but I did ask for forgiveness for my part, because that's what love looks like. Love looks like patience, kindness, and does not boast, and forgives all faults. So I can forgive you, but you have to deal with what you did. And from that point on, my mom deteriorated, and she eventually passed in January. And the sad part is that it wasn't intentional. She did die alone in the hospital. But you know, the chaos that was inside my soul from the time I was young had just finally gotten to a point that I had to reconcile all of it. And I made my dad 2 vows. One is no matter what it took, that wouldn't be the end of the story, and that I didn't know how, but I was going to become the man that he wanted me to be. And so yeah, that's the whole story. It's the first time I've ever told it from beginning to end. But yeah, it wasn't just a video. It was 6 years of trying to work through a system and a hospital, and they all failed. And by the grace of God, a couple people said, "Hey, we'll help you."
Well, God bless you. You're here, man. I'm not gonna lie. It was an intense story. I teared up there for a minute too, because my dad was in the hospital during this stuff, and he would call me all the time and just bitch. You know, Joey is there, just. And what I mean, he was, you know, he had dementia too, and there's nothing I could do. I mean, what I got a family to raise. He got a job. I don't know the first thing about that kind of care. You know what I mean? But you know, getting to see him, you know, before it happened, right, and getting to say goodbye, tell him that the world was. I swear to you, man, I wasn't wearing this hat. I was wearing a Brooklyn Dodgers hat for some reason, but I looked him in the eye and said, you know, the world's a better place for you being here. I was proud to be your son, and I'll try to carry on the best I can, right? The best, you know, and once your parents are gone, Travis, you're the top, especially your father. You're the top dog. I saw a statement once that said, you know, once your dad passes away, it's the last person on this earth, last male on this earth who wants to see you succeed. And that really was like, I feel it. And that's where you just have to. I think me personally, it sounds like you have too as well. Just grown a lot since the father's passed away. Just because. I mean, you got no choice, right? It's either I could sit here and sulk. Would you? The way I look at it like this: would my father want me to sit here and sulk and boo-hoo, my dad died, or would he want me to use that experience to better the earth, better my family, better my life, and just leave the world a better place, and you know, make him proud? You know, if God willing, he is looking down at me from up above. You know what I mean?
So, a couple of things. One is I don't think it's a coincidence. It's just my personal opinion that Jesus didn't start his ministry until his earthly father Joseph died. I can tell you that all the things that led up to my dad's death were very traumatic, and that was the only thing I had in my life that was good. I mean, I loved my kids, but you know, it was just different, right? Like that was the one that loved me back more than I could love him. And I understood it because I felt that way about my kids. But it reminded me of my own mortality. It reminded me that someday I'm going to be here. And I went, is what I've done who I want to be? What? It wasn't just about honoring my dad's legacy. It's what legacy do I want to have? Right? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? And, everybody's different. I knew what I was called to do. And, like the depth of my grief matches the depth of my intensity and the depth of, if you look at what we've done around honoring my father, that's, and I love what everybody else has done, but ours is pretty unique in that the way we've done it. Like, I'm very proud of it, not because of me, but because of how it's helped. Like, I've been able to insert myself and use a platform. If you had told me some of my closest friends would be fans, or that they would reshape, like the last gift he gave me was all of those fans, because I hated somebody that loved me and loved him. And they loved me even though I had no reason. They had no reason to love me. I had not given them anything, but they would go, "Thank you for your sacrifice." I'm like, oh my, like I was so blind. And then it's like one day I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I went to private school. I wouldn't go to private school if there wasn't fans that liked my dad. Like, it just, the dots connected. And so that experience of losing him required change. It required, and it took more than what I feel God called me to do is pretty intense. I didn't know what it was going to look like. I certainly didn't think it would be the way it is. And it's not like there's not money with it. I inherited a legacy that was so different than I think, I got to live with my dad till he's 71. A lot of these wrestlers kids die in their, 40s and 50s. Like, I knew him up and down, left and right. He was loved by his grandchildren. He was adored by our family. But I can't rest my laurels on his accomplishments. See, the only thing I needed to do was be the man that he wanted. There were things Dad couldn't do. And I will tell you, I've been able to do those things, and he wanted those for me. Like, he said when I was 15 years old that one day I would tell his story, and he said, "And wait, and don't embarrass your mother." And I'm like, okay. And so, over the last 8 months that she's passed, like, I've worked through these things in my head and thought, okay, how do I share? There was bad things. My mom and I did make amends. Like, I was able to, I took her to church and we sat down together, and, she didn't want the life I was choosing, and I had to have boundaries. Right. But I loved her when I didn't hate her. I didn't do anything mean to her ever again. Never said a mean word to her again. And I genuinely did find a place of love, which, what I always say, like, if Jesus can forgive me for all the crazy crap I did, I am required to extend grace to others for everything they did. Like, it can't be one of it's not one or the other. But my dad's passing, for me, everybody has a different story and a different legacy. Like, his was bigger than life. So my expectation and standard for myself is bigger than life too. Like, these little nods that happen though, like, because people are like, I remember Mr. Wonderful. Like, we did that. By the grace of God, we did that, right? And one of the things that recently happened was last year in October. Like, when I took over as the executive of the state, there was nothing, no merchandise, no deals, no social media. We started from scratch. And I got a phone call from a guy named Tyler Elnick, who's like a brother to me. He's like, "Hey, I'll do the post, you do the comments." And I'm like, okay, I can do that. And so we started this from scratch with maybe 800 followers on my Instagram that I converted to my dad's Instagram. And, we loaded in family pictures, and we just started building this thing out. And I called WWE, and the lady said, "Look, we don't have an agreement with them. We don't want anything to do with them." End of story. And I talked to somebody from WWE, like, "Dude, that ain't happening." And I was disappointed because I love my dad and I wanted him to get recognition. But I went, okay, well, I'll build it anyway. Right. And so you do these things day after day after day after day. You show up. And there were times where I would be like, "Hey, Tyler, I'm going to be offline for a month because I'm going through grief, or I'm going to counseling." I mean, I went and, like, I was in therapy for a while there dealing with that. And that was when I came to a place of, okay, I've got to figure out how to manage my physical pain and disability without a substance because it's making me depressed. And so there was a bigger journey than just my spiritual journey. It was a physical one, and 2 surgeries, and now a neurostimulator, right? And so you move forward. Last year on Wednesday, October 29th, what would have been my dad's 75th birthday. I'm sitting there, and I don't know about you, but I get these spam texts every once in a while going, hey, can we borrow this? And I'm like, I blocked them, because it's this spam. And, I get this text that morning, and I had written, I'm a writer, and I express my heart when I do it. I had written something to my dad like 3 weeks beforehand on accident, and I sent it over. And Tyler's like, your dad's birthday isn't for no. It's like, oh my God, like I just was there in that moment. So we posted it, and I'm doing a quick reply. And at the time, I'm still helping and volunteering with this a program that help people get into treatment. And I'm just sitting in my house, and I get a text, and it says, hey, this is Ben from WWE. Can we talk later? Are you available to talk? And it's like 10:30 in the morning, and I look at it, and I copy the phone number and the area code, and I put it in my phone. I'm like, this is somebody messing with me. And I put it in my phone, and I Google it, and it says Connecticut. And I texted Tyler, because this is 3.5 years later from when we were told, no, nothing's happening.
Right.
And I told Tyler, I'm like, dude, I think we're getting the call. And he's like, no way. I'm like, I swear. And so I text the guy back. I'm like, yeah, I'll be available. He said, how did 2:30 work? I'm like, I'll be good. So, my dad's 75th birthday, I'm sitting there, and he calls and he says, hey, we've been watching what you're doing, and we want to be a part of it. He could have been making stuff up. I don't know. But he says, we want to be a part. It wasn't that we want you to be a part of us. It's that we want to be a part of you. And, he says, we want to see if you'd be interested in a deal and Legends deal and all that. Like, I can't say anything. I'm crying. And he said, you there? I said, Ben, I would have done it for free. I would have done it for free. And he said, that's so cool. I was like, it's my dad's 75th birthday. He said, are you serious? I said, yeah. He said, no, I didn't know that. And in those moments like that, that wasn't what we went after. I wanted to bless one person every day. That was it. I wanted to bring a blessing to one person every day. And anyway, so I'm sitting there, and it was like, I felt like God had his arm around my dad, and he just winked, like, keep it going. Because no matter how big you think it can be, God's like, nah, bigger. Let's go bigger. But you gotta stay the course, right? And so, so I've had these meaningful moments with fans, with even with this, and so like this will be the first video game I've ever gotten to play my dad in. Like,
it was funny, man. I was looking back. There was a video game called Micro League Wrestling from 1987. It was your dad versus Hulk Hogan in the thing, and I was watching some gameplay on it. I was like, this is so god awful. I don't know why people. I mean, I know why people like reminiscing about when they were a kid, because we talked about that earlier. But my God, this is just so bad. This is so ridiculous. I can't believe this is a thing compared to some of the other games they had. Man, it's crazy.
I've never played dad in a video game, and not only do I get to play it, I get to play it with my son, his grandchild, and with my niece's son, his great grandchild. So there are 3 generations of people that are going to get the first time. Like that's really cool. Like that's bigger than me, right? And it was never about me in the first place, although it gave me everything I've ever wanted. And if the people that I've interacted have changed my life. Like my life is no matter how much I deal with physical pain, like I'll be honest with you, and my body not broke, my soul would have never healed, because it made me stop and do the work. And I'm just genuinely grateful, and I'm happy, and I don't have that anger anymore. I have peace, and I get to share it with people. And sometimes I got to go, hey, I'm Mr. Wonderful Son. Don't forget that. Like, I don't mean that in like a, negative way, but like I'm coming with credibility here. Like if you want this, I'm happy to share it with you. And if you don't, that's fine. Right. Like, but know that you're talking about my father. And so I got to have that balance of what I want in my world and what I want to put out to the world. And, we just wake up every day, genuinely just try to bless one person, reminder of one memory, and for me, it's bring light to the faith I have in eternity. You don't have to believe that. That's your choice. I don't make that choice. Like, I can tell you though that hope and that belief and the time that it took me to come to that perspective and an opinion my dad had and an opinion that Hogan had, like the most pivotal moment in history was the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Maybe the most argued, but if it's true, it's the most pivotal. And so for me, like all the things that I went through and all the wrestling, it's all a platform for me to bring hope in a world that is broken and dying and so desperately needs it.
Yes, sir. All right, we got a couple, and then we'll skate out of here because my daughter's. Told I was going to do something. I can't remember what it was. I think it's ice cream. She loves ice cream. She really does. All right, this is from Dave. He's not here to get the answer, but because this is back when we were talking about heights. But what about caves? Are you claustrophobic?
I am not claustrophobic. I have no desire to go into a cave. I am not Batman. But I do love the outdoors. As a child, we never wore shirts, or we never wore shoes. Now they call it grounding and vitamin D, right? Like, so there's all these things my dad did that were like, they're healthy. And now it's like, you got to do these things. And I'm like, I've been doing that since I was 6. So, I love the outdoors. If I had my body back where it was, I'd be out on my bike and cycling, and I love being by the pool and getting tan and confusing people about what country I'm from, and I'm serious. I've had people ask me from the Middle East.
Yeah, you could be an extra on one of those shows, be playing for like the regime. I can see it. Yeah, we ask
more tan.
We ask every guest this question: Beatles or Queen? Who'd you pick out of those two bands?
Queen. We got the album right over here, the greatest hits. Talk About the Girls is still one of my favorite songs.
Nice. I love it. All right. What is something you haven't done yet you are sure you will do by the time you are 50? And what is your advice for your future self?
My advice for the future self is stay the course.
Yes,
one of the things that I remember telling people throughout my life when I was trying to deal with myself, one was I didn't want anybody to know all the demons. Now I'm like, look, I came through that. And if I can do it, you can do it too, right? But I remember sitting with people with different parents going, my fear isn't starting. My fear is the maintaining. How do I maintain this energy? Like, I'd go to the gym and get shredded, and then I'm like, okay, I'm done. Like, I accomplished it. I didn't want to keep doing it, right? I got to a point where I did. But I'm so intense and so extreme on things. It's like 0 sugar. Like, I'm like, people are like, I had a cheat day. I'm like, I had one 2 years ago. Like, I am. It's my dad's fault. That's how I was raised, right? Like, there's just certain things you inherit. But yeah, right now, every day is about growth. I have some good men, 3 men. One was at one point in time, my counselor. One of them I met through a fellowship. One of them has been my spiritual guide since I was 7 years old, and he's been in my life that entire time. And so as I navigate this life, I don't do it on my own. I don't trust me, right? Like, I find that when I call them, I already know what the answer is. That's pretty common, but I'm always getting a different perspective in that community of men that are like, I'm holding you accountable. Like, there's things I don't want in my life. Every doctor I talk to, I'm like, look, I don't want opiates. And they think I'm crazy because they're like, what if you hurt? And I'm like, I've already felt it. It won't be that bad. And the payoff you're going to give me is not worth the price that I'm going to pay. The juice is not worth the squeeze. So, like, I had that procedure and they offered fentanyl. I was like, absolutely not. And the anesthesiologist goes, good decision. You're the first person that said no. Guess what? I hurt for like 2 hours afterwards. And the next day I was fine. I don't need preemptive pain medicine. Let me just find out. If it's really bad, I'll call you. Right? Like, for me, it's stay the course. But stay the course means every day waking up, every night meditating in prayer. And one of the ways I've grown recently is I prayed, but now when I'm talking to somebody and they're going through something, I'm like, hey, let's pray about this real quick. And so, like, I'm growing spiritually. I'm in, Bible studies, and that's where I spend my time, while also once I get this stimulator, like me and my doctor talked about it, I'm like, I want off of every medicine and I want to be back on a bike, right? So I have goals physically. I still believe there's an opportunity. I'll see what it looks like. I've done some public speaking and some, sharing and things like that. And I'd love to share with the world if that's what they want. Like, it's not up to me, right? So I just continue to grow and write, and I genuinely try to, like, I know it's simple, and again, I'm not trying to push anything on anybody. I just try to be like Jesus. Like, he said, if somebody sues you for your cloak, give them your tunic. He talked about, that treat everybody else as more significant than yourself, like that level of humility. And the thing is you don't have to like that, but gosh almighty, when I live that way, crazy good things happen that you wouldn't believe. And so that's my pursuit. I'm just trying, like, yes, I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud of the man I've become. I wish I could go fit. The only things I regret in life are the things I told you about. Nothing to do with really my dad, other than thinking if I could have done something different. But like, I've got to live in a way that I'm making amends to those people I can't make amends with. And so while they'll believe, like, it's their responsibility to do with their stuff too, right? Because we're all guilty. But yeah, I just want to be more like Jesus, and I mean that in a sincere. That means sometimes I have to step away because I'm still a selfish male, who's in his 40s. Like, I still struggle, and I still have to. But that's why I have accountability around me. So if you want to know what I want to do before I'm 50, I want to be able to get back down to 8% body fat at around 185 pounds. That's what I want to do before I'm 50. So hopefully this procedure will allow me to do that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right. I'd like to thank Mr. Travis Orndorff for joining us today. It was an amazing time, sir. Be sure to join us next time, everyone, and have a great rest of the week. Rest of the week. Yeah, rest of the week. Bye, everybody. See you guys.